Hi. Thanks for making it this far through the Build conference and coming here right after lunch. So my name is Darren McKenzie. I've been with Microsoft for over 15 years, with over half that time involved in the error reporting space. So I really care about this stuff and interested in this area. Windows error reporting, if you're not familiar with, is just the system where crashes and hangs are sent up from customers, and then Microsoft servers process that information, then provide that information back to our partners and then internal Microsoft teams. I remember the early days of this analysis, talking to internal Microsoft teams and saying, hey, I can figure out the top hardware device or the top computer manufacturer for a given system. And they were saying, hey, I'm not sure you can get that information. But really now that information is really sort of expected. We have a rich ecosystem of companies sort of looking at this information. And generally when companies start looking at this information, they really see this as valuable. So what I'm going to sort of go over is just general information on the importance of customer feedback, a little bit about the data, so just some definitions of error reporting information, and then some description of how you can get the data. I'll be giving you a sneak peek into the new services providing this data, and then we'll go in through a day in the life of somebody who has an error reporting system. So we'll start with the crash, look at the reports that you're able to see this information, and then, hey, you got this information, let's go through some automation for this, because going back to the reports over and over again is time-consuming. And then once you have this information, it's automated, hey, what's some ways that you can maybe build some customized reports within your organization? So we have some sample reports that do that. And then once you have that, look at this information within Visual Studio. So close the loop, look at Visual Studio. The example I'm going to be using is a user mode case, but if you're looking for a kernel mode case with Visual Studio, there was a advanced debugging for apps and drivers session that shows that case. So the example I'll show is user mode. And we'll talk about, hey, once you found this solution for something within Visual Studio, how do you respond back to customers? So what are some options for that? And then we'll give a recap of that. So hopefully what you're able to look at today, in addition to kind of getting a sneak peek to the reports, is a little bit of information of how you can do automation for that. So we'll just get a little bit into the code, a little bit, just a superficial look at that, and just kind of a description of how that works, and then maybe some customized ways that you can work with this information. So one quick question, how many are already familiar with error reporting, use WinQual today to get that information? Okay, so some of you. So some of the concepts I'm mentioning might be familiar to some of you. Some folks, this might be new information that we're looking at. So just quickly, why this data might be important. This is important within Microsoft. The numbers I have right here are taken from the 2009 PDC talk that Steven Sinofsky gave on how Microsoft uses error reporting and other sort of telemetry data during the life cycle of Windows 7. So you can think of that beta to GA. We received 10 million reports, and that sort of helped facilitate about 4,700 code changes. So you can kind of say, hey, this data is sort of useful in sort of prioritizing items that you're looking at. Microsoft has a big investment in this area. So we've had the error reporting client on the system since Windows XP. We've continued that. It actually has its origins earlier within Microsoft Office. We have over 2,000 companies who at some time have logged into the existing services and mapped their files and products and are receiving current error reporting telemetry. We think this data is useful. We think this to us. We think there'd be valuable information to you. So a little bit about the data. So let's just talk about just some quick definitions about data. So let me talk first about the bucket. In this case, I'm referring to, this is a user mode concept in this case. So this is sort of the evidence the client gathers. So this is when a user has a crash or hang, essentially it sends up the application module name and version information. That information is sent back to Microsoft systems, and that information is processed based on sort of collection rules. So this will be based on mapping, so we'll go into more detail what this means, or you can request more cabs. Those rules are sent back to the clients, and we collect cab information. So these cabs have a memory dump. So memory dump is sort of key. The memory dump is what's used to process information on our essentially debugger harness that's running on our backend servers. And we give that information, we get what's known as a failure. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. There's also some additional files that are collected. It's done by WMI, our Windows Management Interface queries. So these files give you additional system information, and depending if it's a user or kernel mode dump, you get some different files that you can use that give you some additional information you can analyze on a system. A failure basically is the result of what the backend server does, the processing harness on a server. So we have you may have heard of Bang Analyze debugger extension. So that's essentially those debugger extensions give an output of essentially based on symbolic information of the faulting module. You'll see other information depending on user and kernel, like the problem class, exception code, or the bug check code for kernel. And we give that information back in the term of a failure. Symbols really help getting more actionable data for the processing harness. So the Windows Hardware Certification Kit has a way that you can provide symbols to Microsoft. You can provide what's known as strip symbols, so you're not getting any information. So we can still give your driver, in this case, confidential information to us, so you can provide that. But giving that information really helps with analysis. And what I'll show you with the demos is how maybe you want to use the symbols locally that you can get better information. And then what is a response? I'm sure everybody has seen this in some way. If you ever had a blue screen of death, a crash, or if you had a client application crash, how many of you have seen this in some way or some capacity? Okay. Surprised it's not more folks. So this is just what you see is on the corner of your machine. You'll see a flag. And it gives a pointer to the action center. And the action center points to hey, go update your driver, go update your application, or, hey, this isn't something we support anymore. So maybe go update to the latest versions. There's different options to this. The data we provide is free, but there are a couple of small requirements that we require. So one is you do need a Class 3 VeriSign certificate. So if you already have one, you can use that. If you don't have one, we have a $99 one that you can use. This is just so we know who you are when you're looking at the files in question. You also need to sign the Windows Error Reporting or Terms of Use version 1.2 agreement, and that's just some information about usage of that data. So you can go and look at this information. It gives you some more details on guidelines for that. So we talk about some basic concepts. How are you going to get the data? So what I'm going to be showing with the demos is a sneak peek with the Microsoft Developer Network Dev Center. So that's how you're going to be getting that data. So just some key concepts that I want you to understand. So if you use WinQual today, sounds like some folks are familiar with that. All the existing WinQual services will essentially be brought into the development center. So you can kind of see the picture here. If you're familiar with driver distribution center or device metadata, that information will be brought over. We essentially have two dev centers. One's focused on system vendors, so that would be hardware manufacturers using drivers or computer manufacturers. That's the hardware development centers. And then for desktop, as opposed to Metro, desktop software vendors, you'll be seeing the desktop development center. And then based on your profile, you'll see the information. This is just so if you're maybe if you're a desktop company, you're really probably not interested in driver distribution center. You just have the center is focused on the information you have. So all the information that you had provided through WinQual, so if you already have an existing cert, your logins, all that information is brought over. In the case of the error reporting, Windows error reporting information, that will be brought over as well. So if you already have drivers mapped, so it's mapped at a file level, that'll be brought over. If you already have product information, that'll be brought over as well. So you'll see that initially. We have some enhancements on top of that, but we don't want you to waste the information that you already provided before. If you have a question about, maybe a logical question is where does the Metro-style applications fit into this case? So if you saw Ted Dworkin's talk with the Windows Store, he gave you a view of the developer dashboard, and that information, he showed how you can get reliability information. That's sort of the pointer for Windows Metro-style applications to see failure type information. I'm not going to go into that. That was the focus of the Windows Store talk. The focus on this presentation, the demos I'm going to be showing you, are focused on the dev centers. So that would be the hardware companies, devices, and then the desktop companies. All right, demo. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Oops. Okay, so I'm giving you got to give me a little bit of latitude in here. This is a sneak peek to the site, so we're essentially showing you information on this is essentially a test site or a development site that we use. So if something happens, keep in mind that this is a test site. I just want to give you a feel of what this looks for. Also, the user interface, there's some things that will be enhanced over time. So just keep that in mind too. But this does give you a general idea of what this looks like. So we have a demo company that we use for reporting called Spiral Orbits. So this is just how we can sort of look at test data or development data within an organization. So think if I'm this fictitious company called Spiral Orbits, and I built an application called CrashMe. So I have a CrashMe application. I'm sure you've seen this. Here we go. We'll run CrashMe. Boom! Here we go. My application is Crash. I want to see information on this. How do I go ahead and see this? I built this application. I have the unfortunate name of CrashMe. How do I see information on my particular application? So let me go ahead and close that. So here I'm at the Dev Center. So in this case, I'm interested in the reports information. That's where you're going to be providing or seeing the error reporting telemetry. Hey, let me go ahead and see the reports that I'm looking at. So what we start you out with is sort of a top 10 view of information. So it's just kind of, in a sense, here's a teaser, or here's a top headline view of information that you have. One thing that's nice here, if you previously used this data that you notice, is we provide top user and top kernel mode failures within this view. Previously, you had to go to a user mode section that was called hardware, and separately you'd have to go to a software section for user mode. This information is provided together. We know that, for example, hardware companies are going to have a control panel application or different utilities that'll be user mode in addition to maybe their kernel mode drivers. So you want to have a holistic view of that information. Also, there are companies that are user mode that may be providing filter driver companies, or maybe providing a filter driver. So the boundaries of companies or what products that companies provide, it doesn't always fit in this clean user mode or kernel mode. So we chose to one nice win here is just provide this information all together in this one view. So let's look at some of the information that we have here. So this is, remember the CrashMe application that crashed? So that information is now flowed. The cab that I provided is now funneled into the system. Yay, it works. So here's the report. So here's some trending information that you're looking at. Quick view, you can see with the operating system breakout. I know some companies, if, for example, if all the reports are happening on older operating systems, sometimes they're not as focused on the resources, so you want to see an operating system breakout, architectural breakout. So it's useful to sort of focus where your energies are in this case. Here's the cabs, so you can go ahead and download the cabs. So here's this information. Or you can go ahead and request more data. So we provide a default dump information. You may need more information for debugging. So in the user mode case, you may want to request the heap dump or collect some additional information. Maybe these are based on the WMI queries. So there's the information on user mode, plus training information. Let's move over to kernel mode. Okay, here we go. Very similar information that you have here again. So OS breakout, architecture breakout, some trending information. You also have the hardware ID breakout or PMP ID breakout. So if your driver has hardware IDs, it's not a filter driver, maybe it's some sort of device class. You want to see the top hardware IDs associated with it. So later on, we'll talk about how maybe you want to provide updates, or you want to see which systems this is affecting. You want to see the PNT ID breakout. I think I actually have an example of what that might look like. This is just test data. Hey, here we go. So there's some real data, not just none. So you can look at this information. One thing here, I can show you the response dialog. So here, this will be updated, but this is essentially the core of what the response information looks like. So you provide the URL, the fix, the responsive information, comments. There's a tie to a submission. Essentially what the process is, this goes back to an editor within Microsoft. So you make sure that the information makes sense to customers, and then we'll go ahead and hook up that response to that failure information. So failure occurs, system reboots in this case, this is a kernel case, and then you see the response for the particular issue. All right, so top 10 might be nice, but what if, you have a case where you have many drivers, or you want to organize the information perhaps to a particular product that you have. The top 10 isn't going to always suffice for the views that you're interested in. So along with this, what we've done is we've provided a product mapping tool. This is the one item I'm going to have to just show you screenshots on this, but the rest of the stuff I'll have here will be live information. So this is our new product mapping tool. So we have in the background a metadata system that takes this mapping information. So these are a bunch of files that maybe you provided. This is for kernel mode information we do at a file name or driver basis. We understand that, particularly for drivers, sometimes you'll see cases where you have multiple versions. Maybe you're working with different computer manufacturers, or we'll often see multiple versions. So you just map it at a file name and case, and then we'll be able to understand that these are the versions you're looking at. So you just type in your name. Here's your name here that you have. We do have collision detection, so if you're mapping something that somebody else has already provided, we have somebody in the background who sort of looks at, oh, hey, you're providing a file name that somebody else has. Let's make sure that we're providing the data to the right company. Here's a product. So in this case, what you do is you just point to a folder or directory, and you say, these one or more files are the products that I have, and we essentially pull out the header information, like your link date and your version information, and then that information becomes the product. An easy description of this or model for this is you could think of this as maybe Excel or Word or something like that. That would be, hey, these applications or these products are made up of multiple files. And this makes, we'll show you in the report area, this is probably a very common way for you to organize or looking information that you have. So one thing that you might want to add, so here's the product is talk about what's the life cycle of this product. So it could be a current release, sustained engineering product, or it could be a pre-release. This is a good model. The pre-release model worked well with a number of companies where they might create a version and just have a limited pool of information that you have, and you want to see if there's issues, and then you're able to get these fixes before it goes to a larger distribution. So this is a good way to see what's going on with on a particular file before it impacts a larger group. So we recommend use for that. And you can flag this when you're looking at the product information. So start a product, Word, Excel, PowerPoint take model. Maybe you have a collection of products, a suite or a group of information. So this would be the product group. So the product group would be, here I have the CrashMe suite before I had the CrashMe product. And this would be a collection of products that you're looking at. Okay, so we provided, so here. So we're in the top 10 view that we're looking at. So here's some different reports that we have. So we gave you example of the product suite information that you're looking at. So now how are you going to get reporting data on here? So just a matter of pointing on the product group. So here, product group was the Crash Me for Build suite, the collection of products. Now I want to look at all files associated or file versions that are associated with that product. So let me go ahead and click on this. So here it is. You notice this is the same as the top 10 information since it's a small group. But this makes it I think it's pretty straightforward. It makes it a lot easier to sort of focus on a particular product that you're looking at, and you can say, okay, just look at this particular suite or look at this product, and you can get the information that you're interested in. The other information, so the product group can be either kernel or user mode information, but it's based on a version level view. So here's the driver summary report. So driver summary reports on the Spiral Orbits company. So here's the information I'm having here. We start with the driver name is the top 5 versions by percentage. So most of the time that's probably what you're looking at, but you can look at all versions that are applicable for that. Or we can go, so here's the top 5 versions that we have, or we can look at all reports for a specific version that we're looking at. So let me switch over. So here's the, notice my quick jump here. So here we're looking at, this was for I was looking at the crash kernel driver.sys, give me all the failures information. And then from there, you get very similar to details that you have for the top 10. And then we have other filters that you can apply. So you can look, again, at any applicable versions that you're looking at. What's the OS? So maybe you're only interested in Windows 7 SP1 or the Windows Developer Preview. Maybe you're only interested in reports based on that. Or you're only interested, so the OS type concerns information for server versus client information. So sometimes I've heard that the bulk of companies are looking at client, but sometimes maybe you have a specialized storage driver. It runs on and runs on a server. These reports might be less, but it's critical information, so you want to look at that particular filter on there. And then you can look at different time frames, different architectures that you have. Other thing that we have on the reports in general is the ability to do subscriptions. So this is one way that, hey, you want to continue going to the reports. The simplest way of just getting information is subscribing for a particular report, and we'll just send this information once it's processed, we'll send this out to you. Okay. So let me, so that's the reports. So now let's talk a little bit about automation. So sure, you can use the subscriptions, or you can go ahead and go to a specific reports, but often if you really want to look at trending data or you want to look at a large amount of data, it becomes very difficult to manage that information. So the next step of looking at this is sort of, how do I automate this? Maybe I need a constant stream of information that I'm working with. What I've seen in the case for companies that they don't have automation is essentially you have the Excel person. So the Excel person might grab information and they're sort of munging data from the reports and then they send it out. Well, it becomes very slow to distribute that information. Automation makes it much easier to distribute that company and tie it into your workflows. Okay, so what I'd like to demonstrate to you is sort of the next stage. So we have the data. Let's go ahead and talk about, I'll demonstrate some automation. And then what I'll do is we have a custom tool that takes data that you pull down through automation and reprocesses it. So we're using, if you're familiar with the debugging tools for Windows, it extends the debugging tools for Windows, and it uses local symbols to process that information, output it to XML, and take advantage of the local symbols to actually provide the full failure name with symbolic information, the appropriate module. And then once you have that information, in this case, it's outputted in XML, with some good ways of analyzing this information so you can figure out, hey, what do I want to get to? So hold on a second here. All right, so the demo I'm going to show you is a command line processing information, so it's may not be visibly exciting, but I think the concepts of it are real exciting. So here, I have this cab location where I'm pulling down the cabs I'm looking at. Maybe I have a scenario where whenever reports coming in, I just want to pull down those cabs and start analyzing this information and seeing what's going on. So here is cab information, and then what I'm going to do is kick off this application. So we have this application. I'm going to talk about this that's using the, takes a minute to run. It's using the report API, and I'll give you more details on this. Might have to come back to this later. So what it's going to do is pull down all the information and allow you to see these cabs. So anything that you saw in those reports is accessible through an API. So I'll talk about how that works. But essentially, all the report information that we have was generated. Yay, it's working. So all the report information that we generated is based on SQL Server Reporting Services 2008 R2. And the nice thing about that system is it exposes all the report information as an Atom-based feed. So you can tap in that information, that feed information, and pull it down automatically. All we're doing with this feed is we're providing a wrapper for security and making it a little bit easier for to access the information. But you can see here, a lot easier to pull it down programmatically than it is to go to each one of the report cabs and pull it down. So here it is. We pull down this information. To save a little bit of time, I'm going to fast forward some steps. So we go ahead, we process the information. So I had a processing folder, and we outputted all the cabs that we have into XML. All the tools that we're providing, so that the version of the partner feeder and then the analysis tools that we're providing, we'll be providing to you this sample code through the WER analysis blog that's part of MSDN. So I'll have a link at this, or a description of this at the end, but you'll be able to get access to this information or the sample code for this through the WER analysis blog. So here's information. We outputted this. You can see here's information in a kernel cab that we have. I talked about the mini dump and the, actually this is user mode. The WER internals metadata, so let's get some system information, then app compat information that gives you more details on that file. And then it outputs into XML, so this is the output of this information. So I've outputted this information into XML, and you can see here, where's my symbol information? Here's the simple information that we have. Okay, so I have process information that I'm working with. And now, hey, how do I create a report or some sort of visualization around this information? So what I've done, and what will help you with providing with this tool set, is integrating with this tool called Pivot. So this is a tool created by Microsoft Research. And what this tool does is it sort of allows you to create a visual representation of XML. So we're integrating the processing information that you saw in the analysis XML and giving you a way of looking at that information. And all that information that's in the XML now, you can go ahead and provide some flexible ways for viewing this information. So OS architecture or locale, OS build. The system that I'm looking at that we built this sample crashes was 7600 or Windows 7, but you can provide any information that you have on here. But if you, so here, I was looking at the crash me for build, so that's the information I'm looking at. So I've already checked that's what I'm looking at here. Now further, I'm interested, since I've ran the processing with my local symbols, I'm actually interested in information on a specific module. So let's look at this particular module. Now we've broken down this further, and here's the output. So I don't know if you remember in the reports, so we can go back to the reports, you saw the problem class invalid pointer read, and then the exception code, the access violation C5. You saw a bang unknown for that information. Here you're actually getting the right symbolic information that you can look at, and that's the result of symbols. And you can use either, ideally, you'd provide symbols to us, and we can give that to the failure information, but you can use a tool like this to provide with local symbols and provide the output that you're looking at. And then you can go ahead and get information on that specific crash. So here, so what we walk you through is automation through the report API, and then processing information with this, with the debugger tools of Windows, and then giving you a visualization of this information so you can get some more granular view. And let me go ahead and remove the filters, and you can kind of see different cool stuff that you can build out of here, like locale information, different architectures that you're looking at, different OS builds, so you can get much more information from this tool. So, let me just talk a little bit about the report API, just to give you a little bit more context to this, because I think this is kind of a key piece of the view that I have. Maybe the demo wasn't as compelling, but I think the story behind it is really compelling. This applies to all the reports that were provided to you. So all this is accessible to you programmatically. And over time, we want to use, this is really a platform we're building, so we'll build more reports available for different information, so you can use the same sort of automation. And as I mentioned before, this is based on SQL Server reporting services, Atom-based feed that you can access. So essentially, what the way it's structured is you point to a specific URL that's going to give you a list of reports. So in the command line option that I have that I was pointing to, that was the company summary report, if you remember the top 10. So there's a company summary report information that I was pointing to. And then once you got access to that report, you're going to get a listing of feeds. So there's different sections of that report that corresponds to feeds. In this case, I was interested into the CABs, so that's sort of the core part of analysis for you. So I'm interested in the CABs. So the next step was get access to the CABs. And then from there, hey, I got access to the CABs. Let me go ahead and iteratively pull down those CABs that I want to go ahead and process. So in that case, I have access to the feed. Let's go ahead and pull that information down. And then this is a very sort of simple code sample. Again, we'll give you some more information as we get closer to the release of the dev centers. That will give you, hey, essentially it's a C# example that's looking at, hey, let's create a web request. So this is a particular method that gives you access to the HTTP web request object, and then from there, that's where you're getting access to the different reports, the feeds, and so forth. Okay, so the next step, you figured out what you want to analyze. So you pulled around all this data. You figure out, hey, I want to look at that particular C5 issue that's problematic on my crash me for build application. Let's go ahead and debug that information so I can figure out what's going on. So hold on. Okay, so I'm in Visual Studio 11, and I've sort of, just to save a step, I've just pulled one of the mini dumps that were available here. So I provide this information. Here's the mini dump that I'm working with. Let's pull it in here. I've already set my local source and symbol code for this particular application. So that makes it, otherwise this demo or process wouldn't work. So let's go ahead and debug. This is a native code example that I'm showing you here. So I'm going to the debugger. And here I know that this is where the particular problem is. Nice here, a couple things just to back up a little bit. Here, you get some default information on that mini dump, like the nature of the exception code that you have. And I'm not going to show the local example. You get the loaded modules as well for that application. So let's go. So now I've gone ahead and I'm debugging this information. It's giving me the call stack, very useful information. And And let me go ahead and point to that pointer in the application, or that location. And here it is. I'm getting pointing to the specific source code. So here, it's a buffer overrun, and it's a misspelling error, although the debugger doesn't help with misspelling programmatically. But here's this information. Hey, I've figured out where the problem is. Let me go ahead and create an update and get this out to customers. Okay, shall we show, oh, question? So the question is, can I generate a exception for my application without crashing itself? So let me go back. So your question is, can I just like here, can I set up send it out without sending it out to Microsoft? Or, well, you can generate, I mean, so a couple things. One, certainly an opt-in process for sending information to Microsoft. So if you don't want to send it, that's okay. And then you could certainly generate a dump from your application and go ahead and analyze that locally without sending it to Microsoft. So you can go through those steps. Okay, so we've integrated we showed an integrated user mode application. Again, if you want to look at kernel information, look at the advanced app and driver debugging session. I saw that yesterday. I was very excited about the fact that there's a methodology where you can integrate kernel debugging within Visual Studio. So I would look for that if you want to get a parallel information on that. But what I showed you was a native mode debugging on an application within Visual Studio 11. So we go ahead and showed you the demo on that. So closing the loop. So I went ahead and figured out a fix for my particular application, and I want to go ahead and inform customers that there's a particular issue on the application. What are some of the methodologies for this? So I talked before the Action Center messages that you have. So if you remember within the report, there's a create response dialog. So that's what initiates the request for this information. This information is provided to customers through the Action Center. In general, the scenarios that you're looking for this, hopefully the best one is you have the update that has a fix. So maybe it's like the Crash Me application, you figured it out. You want to tell customers what's going on. The other step, maybe there's an update or steps that might fix the problem. So sometimes I've seen with companies is they're really not sure how to fix a particular issue. I think the latest version does it. That's my best guess. So you can give that information, provide that in the response, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that. The other ones, you can maybe customer feedback. Maybe you want to hook up a survey or different information, or the not supported type scenario. The other one is driver distribution center. So you have a driver that you want to provide an update for. So this would be a driver with an INF, so an INF that has hardware IDs or plug-and-play IDs information. So that you want to provide an update for this. So the steps for this would be work with the MSDN Hardware Development Center. So we give you a view with that. And then go to the driver distribution center for your update. The driver has to be certified, so you have to go through the certification process. Go through driver distribution center. And then with that, you do things like specify the operating system that you're interested in, specify the hardware IDs that you're interested in, and then that's available to customers through Windows Update. And generally with that, it's either specific update or product update for the item that you're working with. Question? So the question is, can driver distribution update, driver distribution center? Or? Oh, I see, as opposed to a service as opposed to application, like we showed here. Let me validate that question for you. So why don't you come up afterwards, and I'd like to understand more in your scenario, and we'll check how that can work for you. Okay, so review, and then we can certainly have time for more questions, is use the Microsoft Dev Centers to access your data. So these will be coming soon. You saw a sneak peek for getting this information. Use automation to download information that you're working with. So automation allows you to bring this into your system, provide customization. Use Visual Studio with symbols, or better yet, provide us with symbols beforehand so you can get information through certification to help with root cause information. And then close the loop through updates through responses or through driver updates. And then other sessions that you could look at, definitely if you want to look at kernel debugging in the context of Visual Studio 11, please look at the advanced app and driver debugging. It also has some other neat things like network-based debugging that you're working with. Best practices for packaging and distributing device drivers. So this is more in-depth information with Driver Distribution Center and just some other suggestions. The Windows certification program. So if you want to provide symbols, or again, if you want to go through Driver Distribution Center, that's a way of working with that. And then the Windows Store. I showed you a focus more on the desktop software vendor or the hardware companies. If you're interested in Metro-style applications, is the Windows Store is going to provide you information on the failures that you're working with. And then further reading of information. Certainly the Worst Services blog is where we're going to provide information on sample code. So the partner feeder, the tool that was used for outputting XML using the debugging tools, Windows debugging tools, and then the extensions we're working with Microsoft Pivot. So if you want to have those sort of tools to help you analyze. And then the dashboards themselves for getting information. Okay. Any other questions? Question?
We've been producing apps and drivers for 2 years, and we never used this error reporting and tools and that. Is there data waiting for us like that we can download today and have a look at?
Great question. So the question is, hey, I'm a company that does produce drivers and applications. What do I need to do in order to get involved with that? There isn't data for you unless you've already provided mapping type information for you. So in the near future, so one question you're probably thinking, when is this coming? This is coming soon. So in the near future, you'll be able to use the product mapping tool. So that would be, hey, give me your driver name or give me your products. If you want to do that today, you can go through winqual.microsoft.com, and then there are some options from there where you can provide both product and driver-based mapping. So if you want to get started today, go there, and then that will just carry over once we start with the new site. But it's not automatically there. Somebody has to provide that information in order for us to go ahead and process that data and provide it to you. So the question is, you don't store crash reports unless we provide it? We're getting the data, but we're not able to provide the relationship with your company unless we understand the mappings that you have. So unless you say, hey, driver.sys belongs to me, company ABC, we're not going to know that relationship. But certainly we'll know that driver.sys, that there's data, the report for that. So that's why once you provide that mapping, we'll start our reprocessing, and we'll provide that data for you. We'll be ready with that data. Question?
Can we make a large-language response?
Oh, the question was multi-language response. The responses are localized in multiple languages. I don't remember the specific list, but it's sort of the top languages that you're working with. If you have so there is a way for doing that. If you have a specific scenario in your mind, come talk to me, and I'll make sure that the response folks can support the scenario that you're looking at. But the responses are supported on multi-language area. Question over here? So let me break out the question. So the question was, can I get a different version range for drivers that I'm looking at? So maybe, I think a typical scenario is, hey, I'm only interested in maybe a more recent set of versions, or maybe there's a particular partner that I'm working with that has a specific version that they're working with. The answer is we don't have a multi-select version option. You can specify the version that you're interested in. So you could, let's go back to the laptop. So you can go here and you can specify once you selected the application, you can say I want this version, you want this version. So I guess probably your options would be either programmatically, sort of say, hey, I want these versions. Certainly, if this is a scenario that is real important to you, maybe let's talk afterwards, and it'd be helpful for me to understand kind of the use case that you're working with. But as it stands now, it's sort of on a per version basis that you provided. The way that the user mode reports would work is in the context of a product mapping or product suite mapping that you're working with. So you would have to provide the specific versions that you're interested in on a user mode basis. Other questions? Or yes? I only got part of your question. The question was how much time does it take to create a response? Oh. So you've provided the scenarios, you provided the information to us. Here it is. How much time does that take for us to review that information? Most of the time that takes about a week. It's sort of variable time depending on the quantity that we have or sort of where we are in the cycle that we're working with. But we try and work through that as fast as we can in order to get that information. Maybe if it's something complex, we have to get back to you with questions like, hey, we're not sure this makes sense with the content editors we're working with. We ask more questions to get some clarification for you. Other questions? Yes. So the question is, how do I work within say, an enterprise closed environment where you don't want to send it out to Microsoft, but you do want to see information on error reporting? We don't. So let me answer this in two ways. One, we don't have a reports in a box version that we provide to you, but we do have a tool called the corporate error reporting that's sort of built on that scenario where reports are sent within clients within say, an enterprise, and then they can build their own views of that report information, and choose to send it to Microsoft or not. So that's sort of the vehicle for that. Question in the corner?
Related question, what percentage of corporate crashes do you currently estimate are represented in New York?
So the question is, that's an interesting question. So the question is, how much of a percentage does the corporate users represent of this data? The answer is I don't precisely know, so it would be hard to determine. I think it's clear that you probably have an over-representation of consumer data versus corporate information. I think that's a logical assumption of the data that we have, but I don't have we haven't precisely figured out that it's X percent is corporate because of that information. It's very difficult for us to tell. We don't know. There's no personal identifiable information where we're able to identify the specific user, so it's very difficult to tell if it's corporate or not. I mean, you could look at things like, what machine it is or something, but it's difficult to figure out what if it's corporate or not.
I understand you can't get that precisely, but do you have a very broad estimate of what percentage of crashes this may represent? Are you 20% or are you 70%?
Of corporate users, or?
Well, actually, in general.
There's a white paper that talks about, I don't remember the precise number, but there's a white paper that I'm familiar with that we have externally that talks about, based on opt-in rates and so forth, what's our impression on that, and once you come to me afterwards, we'll see if we can find you some more data on that. I just don't know off the top of my head what that is. Yes, another question? Yeah, the question is there any sort of relationship with Windows Update with the drivers that is totally disconnected? So the driver information here is, hey, people select to provide this data. It has nothing to do with Windows Update. The only connection with Windows Update is it's a good mechanism to provide updates to customers. So it's sort of the closing the loop discussion, but it's up to you whether you use it, and certainly has no relation at all on whether. I believe your question is for the responses, the Action Center responses. Can you choose to point to your company website or absolutely? So responses can point to, as long as it makes sense to we're going to review this information, but you certainly can point to your company site. So the question is, how do I get started with this information? Are you a member of WinQual today, or do you have? Okay, so that's started. Person one, you need that Class 3 VeriSign certificate, and then step 2, make sure you sign the Windows Area Reporting version 1.2 terms of use. So I would do both that areas. And then once you've done that, I would go into the error reporting areas and map your respective drivers or map your respective products, and then you can start seeing information. One more question in the back?
Actually, it's more of a testimonial. I've been using this stuff for about 5 years or so since the program first started, and it's really allowed us to make some very significant improvements in our in-field quality. So very good stuff.
Great, I appreciate that feedback. I mean, lots of companies, once they start looking at it and engage with it, get a lot of value. Thanks for that testimonial. Any other questions or? Okay, well, I know it sounds like there's some follow-up items, so please come up here, or if you have some other questions. I appreciate your time today, and hopefully you're sort of interested or excited in the information that we showed you. Thanks.